Get out. You smell like the bus stop outside.
Sir, we have a reservation. It's under Foster.
I don't care what name you made up. Look around. Does this look like somewhere you belong?
We just want to have dinner.
Please, shut your mouth. You don't belong here. Take your ghetto friend and get out before I drag you out myself.
She was sitting in a Coca-Cola-soaked dress. Her hands were trembling. Her best friend was crying beside her, and she had done nothing, except laugh. Have you ever been humiliated in public for simply existing in a space you paid to be in? Stay with me. Because when her husband walked through that door, every single person in that room stopped breathing. To understand how that night turned into a nightmare, we need to go back a few hours. It was the first Saturday of October in Washington, D.C. The air had that early autumn crispness to it, warm enough for a dress, cool enough for the city to feel alive. The leaves along the Georgetown streets were just starting to turn gold. Lorraine Foster was standing in front of her bedroom mirror, humming along to Stevie Wonder. She held up 2 pairs of earrings, small gold studs and simple silver hoops, and went with the gold. She slipped into a navy blue dress. Nothing designer, no logos, no diamonds, just a woman getting ready for a night out with her best friend. And she had every reason to celebrate. That week, Lorraine had closed the biggest case of her career. She was a senior partner at Foster & Whitmore, one of D.C.'s most respected civil rights law firms. The case was an employment discrimination lawsuit against a Fortune 500 company. The settlement? $92 million for her clients. 12 months of work, exposed corruption, justice delivered. Tonight was about breathing, about laughing, about feeling human again after a year buried in depositions and courtroom battles. Her phone buzzed. FaceTime from Denise Moore, her best friend since Howard University. Denise was a pediatrician, a woman who spent her days making sick kids laugh, and her nights reminding Lorraine that life existed outside a courtroom. Girl, I'm stuck on Connecticut Avenue. Traffic is insane. Order me a sparkling water and do not start on the breadbasket without me. Lorraine laughed. That laugh, the one that came from deep in her chest, big and warm and completely unguarded. The kind of laugh that filled a room. Remember that laugh. It becomes important later. She called a car and headed to the Carlton Room. Now, if you've never heard of the Carlton Room, picture this. It sits on a quiet corner in DuPont Circle, one of DC's wealthiest neighborhoods. Dark walnut paneling on every wall, brass light fixtures that cast everything in a golden glow. White tablecloths so crisp they could cut paper. Soft jazz drifting from hidden speakers. The kind of place where an appetizer costs $40 and a steak runs $85. The clientele matched the decor. Overwhelmingly white, overwhelmingly wealthy. The men wore sport coats without thinking about it. The women carried handbags that cost more than most people's rent. There was an unspoken dress code at the Carlton Room, and it had nothing to do with clothes. It was about appearance, about assumptions, about who looked like they belonged and who didn't. Lorraine walked in at 7:15. The smell of seared butter and rosemary hit her the moment she stepped through the heavy oak door. A crystal chandelier threw tiny rainbows across the ceiling. The hum of conversation was low, polished, controlled. At the hostess stand, a young woman glanced up. Her name tag read Tiffany. She looked at Lorraine. Her eyes moved from Lorraine's face, to her dress, to her shoes, and back up again. The smile she offered was thin and brief, the kind you give a delivery person, not a guest. Reservation name? Foster, party of 2, with a booth in the main dining room. Tiffany checked her screen. She tapped a few keys. Then she grabbed a single menu and said, "Follow me." She did not lead Lorraine to a booth in the main dining room. She led her to a small two-top table wedged between the kitchen hallway and the restroom corridor. The sounds of clattering dishes and running water bled through the swinging door. The overhead light buzzed faintly with a flicker. Lorraine looked at the table. She looked back toward the main dining room, where she could see at least 2 empty booths with crisp white tablecloths and candlelight. She said nothing. She sat down. She ordered a Coca-Cola, her celebration drink, the one she always ordered when something good happened, and a sparkling water for Denise. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through emails. She was calm, content, minding her own business in a restaurant where she had every right to be. Now, here is one detail I need you to hold on to. Lorraine's husband, Desmond Foster, was across town that night at a charity gala. He told her he would swing by the restaurant later for dessert. Just keep that in the back of your mind. Because when that man finally walks through the front door of the Carlton room, you are going to understand why the entire room stopped breathing. Lorraine had been sitting alone for about 10 minutes when she first noticed him. Bradley Sinclair, 34 years old, assistant manager of the Carlton room. He stood near the service station with his arms folded, watching her the way a store detective watches a teenager, not with curiosity, with suspicion. His jaw was tight, his eyes were narrow. He had the look of a man who had already decided something about her before she ever opened her mouth. He walked over. He did not introduce himself. He did not smile. He stood over her table, not beside it, over it, and looked down. "Are you waiting for someone, or?" That trailing "or" hung in the air like smoke. It was not a question. It was an accusation wrapped in politeness. Lorraine looked up. She smiled, warm, patient, the kind of smile she had learned to wear in courtrooms when opposing counsel tried to rattle her. "Yes, my friend is on her way, and my husband will join us later for dessert. The reservation is under Foster." Bradley glanced at the hostess stand. He made a show of checking something on his phone. Then he looked back at her. "Right. That reservation was for a booth in the main room, but we had to reassign it. Booking conflict. We're fully committed tonight." He said it with the confidence of a man who expected her to accept it. But Lorraine could see the main dining room from where she sat. 2 booths sat empty, white tablecloths gleaming, candles lit, waiting for no one. She noticed. She said nothing. Not yet. Bradley walked away. But he did not walk far. He positioned himself at the service station, 15 feet from her table, and he watched. Every few seconds, his eyes drifted back to her, not to check if she needed anything, to check if she was still there. 12 minutes later, Denise Moore walked through the front door. Denise was warmth in human form. Bright smile, quick laugh, the kind of energy that made strangers feel like old friends. She spotted Lorraine and crossed the restaurant with her arms already open. "Girl, there she is! The $92 million woman!" They hugged, they laughed, they settled into their chairs with the comfortable ease of 2 women who had been doing this for 15 years. Denise looked around the restaurant with wide eyes. "Okay, this place is fancy. I feel like I need a British accent just to order water." Lorraine grinned. For a moment, everything felt normal. 2 best friends, a Saturday night, a celebration they both deserved. That moment lasted exactly 90 seconds. Bradley reappeared. He materialized at their table like he had been counting the seconds since Denise sat down. He had not checked on the white couple 2 tables over. He had not visited the group of businessmen near the window. He came straight to the table with 2 black women. "Ladies, just so you're aware, we're running a prix fixe menu tonight. The full dinner menu starts at $85 per person. He paused, letting the number hang. We do have a bar menu with smaller plates that might be more comfortable for you. Comfortable. He chose that word carefully. Not affordable, not convenient. Comfortable. As if the full menu would make them uncomfortable. As if $85 was beyond their reach. As if they needed to be guided to something more appropriate for people like them. Denise's smile vanished. Her jaw tightened. She opened her mouth to respond, but under the table, Lorraine's hand found hers and squeezed. Lorraine looked at Bradley with steady eyes. We'll have the prefix, 2 of them, and a bottle of the Willamette Valley Pinot Noir, please. She said it clearly, politely, without a flicker of doubt. She was telling him, without telling him, that she could read a menu, afford the prices, and choose her own wine. Bradley took the order. He did not write it down. He repeated nothing back. He simply turned and walked toward the service station, where Tiffany Holt was standing with her arms crossed. He leaned in close to her ear. He said something. Tiffany glanced at Lorraine and Denise's table. They both looked away quickly when Denise glanced up. Something was building. Lorraine could feel it, that prickle at the back of her neck. The same instinct that told her when a witness was about to lie on the stand. But she pushed it down. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration. She was not going to let one rude manager ruin it. The appetizers arrived. A butternut squash soup with a swirl of creme fraiche. The wine was poured. Deep ruby in the glass, smelling of dark cherries and earth. Lorraine raised her glass. To justice, she said. To justice, Denise echoed. And to you for being the most stubborn woman I have ever loved. They clinked glasses. They sipped. They ate. And slowly, the tension in Lorraine's shoulders began to release. Then Denise started telling the story. It was about a 7-year-old patient, a little boy who came in for a checkup and asked Denise with total sincerity, "Are you a real doctor or a TV doctor? Because you're too pretty to be a real one." Lorraine started laughing. Not a polite chuckle, not a restrained giggle. Her full laugh. The one that started deep in her belly and rose up through her chest and filled the space around her like music. She tilted her head back. Her shoulders shook. Her eyes crinkled shut. She was radiant. She was free. She was a black woman, taking up space in a room full of people who had decided that space was not hers to take. An older couple at the next table smiled. A woman across the aisle glanced over with a warm look. Lorraine's laughter was the kind that made strangers feel good just hearing it. But not everyone felt good. Bradley Sinclair stood at the service station. His fingers gripped the edge of the counter. His face was hard. He watched Lorraine laugh the way a man watches something that offends him on a fundamental level. 2 black women, laughing loudly, drinking good wine, eating the prefix, taking up space in his restaurant, his domain. Their joy was an intrusion. Their happiness was a provocation. He leaned over to Tiffany. His voice was low but sharp. "Clean up that table, now." Tiffany hesitated. Her eyes moved to the table. Nothing needed cleaning. The appetizer bowls were neatly stacked. The wine glasses were half full. The table was fine. "Bradley, what do you—" "I said, clean it up. Start with her drink." Tiffany looked at him. Something passed across her face. A flicker of hesitation, maybe even resistance. But it died as quickly as it came. She picked up a bus tray and walked toward the table. Lorraine was still laughing. Mid-laugh, mouth open, eyes closed, shoulders shaking. She did not see Tiffany coming. Tiffany reached the table. She did not say, "Excuse me." She did not reach for the empty plates. She reached for Lorraine's glass of Coca-Cola, still 3/4 full, dark and fizzing, and she turned it over directly into Lorraine's lap. The brown liquid hit the navy dress like a wave. It soaked through the fabric instantly, cold, sticky, spreading across her thighs, dripping down her legs, splashing onto her phone on the table, pooling on the chair beneath her. The smell of sugar and carbonation rose in the air. The laughter stopped. Not faded, stopped, like a song cut mid-note. Lorraine gasped. Her hands flew to her lap. Denise shot to her feet, knocking her chair backward. What did you just do?" Tiffany stood frozen, the empty glass in her hand, her eyes on the floor. She said nothing. And then Bradley appeared, right on cue, as if he had been waiting in the wings for his entrance. He walked up to the table with his hands clasped behind his back and looked at Lorraine, soaking wet, Coca-Cola dripping from her dress onto the hardwood floor. And he did not apologize. He smirked. "Oh, that's unfortunate. You know, maybe that's a sign you ladies should call it a night." He gestured toward the back of the restaurant, toward the kitchen exit, the door the staff used to take out garbage. "The kitchen exit is right behind you if you need to clean up." As if she was the help. As if she had wandered in from the service entrance and needed to be shown the way back out. Lorraine sat there, Coca-Cola dripping from her fingertips, her phone screen cracked and sticky. Her celebration dress was ruined. And she did not scream. She did not cry. She did not flip the table or throw the wine or do any of the things that rage was begging her to do. She looked directly at Bradley Sinclair. Her voice was so calm it could freeze water. "I'd like to speak with the owner of this restaurant, right now." Bradley laughed. Not a nervous laugh, a real one, amused, dismissive. "The owner isn't here, sweetheart. I'm in charge tonight. And I'm telling you, it's time to go." At a booth near the window, a man in a gray sport coat had been watching everything for the past 5 minutes. His name was Nolan Graves. He was a local news anchor, and his phone had been recording since the moment Bradley first walked up to that table. Lorraine did not move. Coca-Cola was still dripping from the hem of her dress onto the floor. The puddle beneath her chair had spread to the edge of the table leg. Her phone sat on the table, screen cracked, brown liquid seeping into the charging port. The smell of sugar hung in the air like something spoiled. Bradley stared at her. She stared back. "We have a reservation," Lorraine said. Her voice did not waver. "We ordered food. We are paying customers at a table we booked 3 weeks ago. We are not leaving." Something shifted behind Bradley's eyes. It was the look of a man who was not used to hearing the word no, especially not from a woman who looked like Lorraine. His nostrils flared, his neck flushed red above his collar. He snapped his fingers at a passing busboy without breaking eye contact with Lorraine. "Clear this table, all of it, now." The busboy hesitated. He looked at the wine glasses still half full, the appetizer plates barely touched, the bottle of Pinot Noir sitting open and breathing. "I said now." The busboy moved. He took the wine glasses first, then the plates, then the silverware, then the bread basket, then the bottle of wine. He stripped the table bare while Lorraine and Denise sat in their chairs, watching everything they had ordered disappear in front of them. A couple at the next table watched in visible discomfort. The woman whispered something to her husband. He shook his head and looked away. Bradley was not finished. He walked to the hostess stand, leaned across the counter, and picked up the phone. He dialed 3 digits. Then he put the phone to his ear and spoke, loudly enough for half the restaurant to hear. "Yes, I need to report a disturbance at the Carlton Room on 19th Street. I have 2 women here who are refusing to leave after being asked multiple times. They're being aggressive and appear to be intoxicated. I'd like them removed from the property." Every word was a lie. Every single word. Lorraine and Denise had not raised their voices once. They had shared 1 glass of wine each. The word aggressive, that word, was chosen with surgical precision. Bradley knew exactly what that word meant when attached to 2 black women. He knew what it would trigger when the police arrived. He hung up and walked back to their table. He planted himself at the end of it, feet wide, arms crossed, chin lifted, like a bouncer outside a nightclub. A physical wall between them and the rest of the restaurant. "Officers are on their way," he said. "You can walk out with your dignity, or you can be escorted out without it. Your choice." Denise's hands were shaking. Her eyes were glassy and wet. She leaned toward Lorraine and whispered, "Lorraine, please, this isn't worth it. Let's just go. I can't breathe in here." Lorraine took Denise's trembling hand. She held it tight. She looked at her best friend, this woman she had known for 15 years, this doctor who spent her days saving children's lives, sitting in a restaurant soaked in humiliation, being told she was trash, being told she didn't belong. "If we walk out now, he wins, Denise. And tomorrow night, he does this exact thing to the next black woman who walks through that door. I'm not giving him that. I'm not moving." Denise closed her eyes. A single tear ran down her cheek. She wiped it with the back of her hand, took a breath, and nodded. They stayed. But Bradley was not done. He leaned down close to Denise, close enough that she could smell the coffee on his breath, and said something only she could hear. "Your friend is going to get you both arrested tonight. If you have any sense at all, you'll drag her out of here before things get worse. Because trust me, they're about to get much worse." Denise flinched like she had been slapped. She squeezed Lorraine's hand tighter, but said nothing. Then Tiffany Holt walked over with a damp rag. Not a clean towel, not a napkin, a dirty gray rag from the bus station, and tossed it onto the table in front of Lorraine. It landed with a wet slap on the bare wood. "For your dress," Tiffany said. She did not make eye contact. Her voice was flat, mechanical, as if she were handing a mop to a janitor. Lorraine looked at the rag. She did not touch it. She looked at Tiffany. "I asked to speak with the owner, not for a cleaning rag." Tiffany's lip twitched. She turned to Bradley, who gave a small nod. She straightened her back and recited what sounded like a rehearsed line. "I've checked the system and your reservation couldn't actually be verified. There's no record of a booking under Foster for tonight." Another lie. Lorraine had the confirmation email on her phone, the same phone now swimming in Coca-Cola. She picked it up, wiped the screen with her sleeve, and held it toward Tiffany. The email was right there. Date, time, party of 2, booth in the main dining room, confirmation number and all. Tiffany glanced at it. She looked away. "I don't know what that is. Our system doesn't show it." From across the restaurant, a man at a corner booth spoke up. Older, white-haired, deep voice. "That's not true. I watched that young lady check the reservation when she walked in. I saw her tap the screen. It was Nolan Graves, the news anchor. He said it calmly, clearly, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Bradley shot him a look that could melt steel. Nolan held his gaze and did not blink. Bradley turned back to Lorraine. His voice dropped lower, quieter, more dangerous. I don't know who you think you are, but in this restaurant, I decide who stays and who goes. And you? You're going. He turned to face the dining room. He raised his voice so every table could hear. Folks, I apologize for the disruption. We've asked these women to leave multiple times, and they've refused. We're not in the habit of tolerating people who can't respect our establishment. The police are on the way, and this will be handled. A few heads nodded. A man in a navy blazer near the bar muttered, "About time." A woman at a two-top clucked her tongue and shook her head. Not at Bradley, but at Lorraine and Denise, as if they were the problem, as if they had brought this on themselves. Lorraine felt it then, the thing worse than anger, isolation. The feeling of being surrounded by people and completely alone. The feeling of being publicly condemned by a room full of strangers who did not know her name, did not know her story, did not know she had spent her entire career fighting for people who looked just like her. And still, in this moment, she was just another black woman being told to leave. Two police officers pushed through the front door at 8:43. The first was a tall man with a clipboard. The second was Officer Pamela Dawson, mid-40s, sharp eyes, steady posture. Bradley met them at the door. He spoke in hushed, urgent tones, gesturing toward Lorraine and Denise. His hands were animated. His face was tight with rehearsed concern. They've been disruptive all evening. They refused to pay their bill. When I asked them to leave, the one in the blue dress became aggressive and started threatening my staff. I'm genuinely concerned for the safety of our guests. 3 lies in 30 seconds. They had not received a bill because they had never served their entrees. They had not been aggressive. They had not raised their voices once. And no one on his staff had been threatened by anything except their own guilt. Officer Dawson listened. She nodded. Then she walked to the table. She looked at Lorraine, soaking wet, Coca-Cola stains down her dress, phone cracked, sitting at a striped bare table with no food, no drinks, no silverware. She looked at Denise, eyes red, hands clasped, trembling. Ma'am, can you tell me what happened here tonight? Lorraine took a breath, and then she did what she had done in courtrooms for 15 years. She recounted every detail. The reassigned table, the prefix comment. The Coca-Cola was deliberately poured on her by a staff member. The canceled order, the threats, the lies. She spoke calmly, precisely, chronologically. She pulled up the reservation confirmation on her cracked phone and held it out. Officer Dawson took the phone carefully. She read the screen. She looked at Lorraine's dress. She looked at the puddle on the floor. She looked back at Bradley, who was standing 10 feet away with his arms crossed and his chin up. She began writing detailed notes. She was not rushing to remove anyone. More phones had come out. At least 4 other diners were now recording. The restaurant hummed with the low electric tension of a room that knew it was witnessing something it would not forget. The front door of the Carlton room opened at 9:11 p.m. No one heard it at first. The restaurant was thick with tension. The low murmur of nervous diners, the scratch of Officer Dawson's pen, the faint crackle of the police radio on the tall officer's belt. Bradley was mid-sentence, explaining to the officers why these 2 women needed to be removed immediately. Then the door swung wide, and Desmond Foster stepped inside. 6'5", 240 pounds. A tailored charcoal 3-piece suit that fit him like it had been sewn onto his body an hour ago. silver cufflinks catching the chandelier light. He filled the door frame the way a mountain fills a valley, completely, unmistakably, without apology. And the room went silent, not gradually, not in waves, instantly, like someone had reached into the air and pulled the sound out of it. A fork stopped halfway between a plate and a mouth. A woman at the bar set her wine glass down without drinking. A waiter carrying 2 plates of filet mignon froze in the middle of the aisle. The jazz from the speakers, Miles Davis, soft trumpet, suddenly felt deafening in the absence of every other sound. Because everyone in that restaurant recognized Desmond Foster. 10 years in the NFL, 3 Pro Bowls, 2 championship rings. His face had been on magazine covers, billboard campaigns, charity galas across the city. In Washington, D.C., Desmond Foster was not just famous, he was an institution. He stood in the doorway for 3 seconds. His eyes swept the room, the silent tables, the frozen waitstaff, the police officers near the back. And then his gaze found her, Lorraine, his wife, sitting at a stripped-bare table near the kitchen hallway, her navy dress soaked dark with Coca-Cola. Her phone was cracked and sticky on the table, a puddle beneath her chair, police standing over her. Her best friend beside her with red, swollen eyes. Something moved across Desmond's face. Not rage, something colder, something deeper. The kind of quiet fury that does not burn, it freezes. His jaw tightened, his shoulders squared, his eyes went still. He walked toward her. Every step landed heavy on the hardwood floor. In the silence, each footfall sounded like a drum. Diners turned their heads to follow him. A woman clutched her husband's arm. The tall officer took a half step back without realizing it. Bradley Sinclair did not know who this man was. He saw a large black man walking toward a table where police were present, and he did what he had been doing all night. He asserted control. He stepped directly into Desmond's path, one hand raised. Sir, we are in the middle of handling a situation here. I'm going to need you to wait at the front to be..." Desmond stopped. He looked down at Bradley, literally by 6 inches. Bradley's raised hand was level with Desmond's chest. It looked small there, fragile. Desmond did not blink. He said 3 words, low, steady, and every ear in that silent restaurant heard them. "That's my wife." Bradley's hand dropped. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. He looked at Lorraine. He looked at Desmond. His brain was trying to connect the woman he had spent the last 2 hours humiliating with the man standing in front of him. He tried to recover. He straightened his tie. He forced authority into his voice. "Well, sir, your wife and her friend were asked to leave because they were being..." Desmond held up one finger. Just one. And Bradley stopped talking. Mid-sentence, like the words had been snatched from his throat. Desmond walked past him. He reached Lorraine's table. He knelt beside her chair. He touched the Coca-Cola stain on her sleeve with 2 fingers. He looked into her eyes. "Are you okay?" She nodded, just barely. He stood back up. He pulled out his phone. He dialed 1 number. The call lasted 45 seconds. He spoke quietly, too quietly for anyone except Lorraine to hear. When he hung up, he slid the phone back into his jacket pocket and turned to face Bradley. He said nothing. He just waited. 90 seconds later, the restaurant's landline rang. Tiffany answered at the hostess stand. Her face went white. Not pale, white. The color drained from her cheeks like water from a cracked glass. Her hand trembled against the receiver. She walked the phone to Bradley. Her steps were small and unsteady. She held it out to him like it was made of glass. "It's Raymond Weber," she whispered. "The owner." Bradley took the phone. He listened. The restaurant watched. His jaw clenched. His free hand balled into a fist at his side. A vein pulsed visibly at his temple. He did not speak. He just listened. When he lowered the phone, his face had changed. The arrogance was gone. The smirk was gone. The man who had spent the last 2 hours treating Lorraine Foster like she was beneath him now looked like a man who had just been told the ground beneath his feet was gone. Because Desmond Foster was not just a retired football player. He was the majority owner, 60%, of the hospitality group that operated the Carlton Room. Every paycheck Bradley had ever cashed came from the man whose wife he had just humiliated. The man whose wife his staff had just thrown Coca-Cola on while she was laughing. Nolan Graves rose from his booth. He introduced himself to Officer Dawson as a local news anchor and formal witness. A woman 2 tables over stood and said she saw Tiffany pour the drink deliberately. A couple near the window confirmed they heard Bradley direct Lorraine to the kitchen exit. The silence that fell when Desmond walked in had turned into something else entirely. Accountability. Bradley Sinclair stood in the middle of the Carlton Room with the posture of a man whose skeleton had been removed. His shoulders caved inward. His hands hung limp. The phone dangled from his fingers like something dead. Every eye in the restaurant was on him. He looked at Lorraine. He looked at Desmond. He looked at the officers. And then he did what every coward does when the ground disappears. He scrambled. "Look, this was a misunderstanding. If I had known who she was, I never would have..." Lorraine cut him off. She did not raise her voice. She did not stand. She spoke from her chair, Coca-Cola still drying on her dress, and her words landed like verdicts. "That's exactly the problem, Bradley. You didn't know who I was, so you decided I was no one. You had your staff pour a drink on me while I was mid-laugh. You called the police and lied to their faces. You told this entire room we were trash." She paused. The silence was absolute. If a white woman had been sitting in this chair wearing this same dress, laughing with her friend, would Tiffany have poured Coca-Cola in her lap? Would you have called the police? Would you have pointed her to the kitchen exit like she was the help? Bradley's mouth opened. Nothing came out. His lips moved without sound like a fish pulled from water. The man in the navy blazer who had muttered "about time" 15 minutes ago was staring at his plate as if he wanted to disappear into it. "That's what I thought," Lorraine said. The front door opened again. Raymond Weber, 59, co-owner of the Carlton Room, walked in with sweat on his forehead and his shirt untucked on one side. He had driven across the city like the building was on fire. He went straight to Nolan Graves. Nolan showed him the video. 30 seconds in, Raymond's hand came up to cover his mouth. By the end, Tiffany pouring the Coca-Cola onto a laughing woman, Bradley smirking and pointing to the kitchen exit. Raymond's face had turned the color of ash. He turned to Lorraine and Denise. He bowed his head. "Mrs. Foster, Dr. Moore, what happened to you tonight is... I'm horrified. There is no excuse. None." He turned to Bradley. His voice dropped to a register barely controlled. "You're suspended. Effective immediately. Keys. Now." Bradley flinched. "Raymond, if you just let me explain." "Keys. Now." Bradley reached into his pocket with a trembling hand. He placed a ring of keys on the nearest table. The metal clinked against the wood in the silent room. Raymond turned to Tiffany, who stood behind the hostess podium, with mascara streaked down her cheeks. "You too, suspended, pending a full investigation. Go home." Tiffany removed her name tag and set it on the counter without a word. Raymond turned back to Lorraine. He offered to comp everything: the dinner, future visits, anything. His voice cracked on the word anything. Lorraine looked at him with steady eyes. "I don't want a free meal, Raymond. I don't want a gift card, or a bottle of wine, or a written apology on a letterhead. I want to know that the next black woman who walks into this restaurant and orders a Coca-Cola and laughs with her friend doesn't end up wearing it." Raymond nodded. He could not hold her gaze. Officer Dawson stepped forward. She addressed Bradley directly. "Mr. Sinclair, you told responding officers that these women were aggressive, intoxicated, and refused to pay. I have multiple witnesses and video evidence contradicting every one of those claims. Filing a false police report is a criminal offense under DC Code. This matter will be forwarded to the district attorney." Bradley said nothing. His face had gone gray. The two officers walked him toward the front door. Not in handcuffs, but in full view of every patron, every phone still recording, every witness who had watched him spend 2 hours treating Lorraine Foster like she did not deserve to breathe his air. He walked past the tables he had once commanded, past the booths he had guarded like personal territory, past the hostess stand where he had called the police with a mouth full of lies. Not one person in that restaurant met his eye. The heavy oak door closed behind him, and he was gone. The video hit the internet on Monday morning. Nolan Graves aired the story on his 6 o'clock broadcast. He played the footage in full, unedited, uncut, unsparing. The camera captured everything. Lorraine mid-laugh, head tilted back, shoulders shaking with joy. Tiffany walking up with the glass. The Coca-Cola pouring into Lorraine's lap. The laughter dying like a candle blown out. Bradley's smirk. The gesture toward the kitchen exit. The police arriving. And then, the moment that made the footage unforgettable. Desmond Foster walking through the door. The restaurant falling into dead silence. And 3 quiet words that cracked the night open. "That's my wife." By Tuesday afternoon, the video had 4 million views. By Wednesday night, 11 million. By the end of the week, it had crossed 15 million and was still climbing. It spread across every platform: Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube. People clipped it, shared it, stitched it, reacted to it. The hashtag the Carlton Room, trended nationally for 4 straight days. The image that became iconic was a single frame. Lorraine sitting in her chair, Coca-Cola soaking her navy dress, her hands resting on the bare table, her face calm, dignified, unbroken. It was compared to photographs from the civil rights sit-ins of the 1960s, not because someone staged it, but because history has a habit of repeating its ugliest moments in new clothes. National outlets picked it up within 48 hours. CNN ran a panel discussion. MSNBC featured Denise Moore in a live interview. The Washington Post published a front-page story. The New York Times ran an editorial. ABC News sent a crew to DuPont Circle. The Carlton Room became the most searched restaurant name in America, and not for its steaks. The restaurant group had no choice but to act. They hired an outside firm to conduct a full internal investigation. The findings arrived 2 weeks later, and they were devastating. Bradley Sinclair had a documented history of racial bias that stretched back 3 years. Former servers testified that he routinely seated black patrons near the kitchen or restrooms. He questioned their reservations at a rate 5 times higher than white guests. He steered people of color toward cheaper menu options, with phrases like more comfortable and more suitable. He made comments in the staff kitchen that multiple employees described as openly racist. 3 formal complaints had been filed against him by former staff members. All 3 had been dismissed by middle management without investigation. One server who complained was quietly let go 2 weeks later. Tiffany Holt's interview revealed the mechanics of the Coca-Cola incident. She confirmed under questioning that Bradley directly ordered her to dump the drink. She said she felt unable to refuse because he was her superior and had threatened to fire a previous employee who challenged him. The investigators noted that while Tiffany acted under pressure, she made no attempt to object, report the instruction, or warn Lorraine. She carried out the act without resistance. The results were swift. Bradley Sinclair, terminated. Tiffany Holt, terminated. 2 middle managers who had buried the prior complaints, terminated. The restaurant group issued a public statement acknowledging systemic failures in oversight and accountability. They announced mandatory anti-bias training for all staff across their 12 locations. They established a customer complaint hotline with third-party oversight. Desmond Foster, as majority investor, personally oversaw the restructuring. He installed a new general manager, a black woman with 20 years in hospitality management. He mandated that the hiring process at every location reflect the diversity of the communities they served. But the legal consequences were just beginning. The D.C. District Attorney filed criminal charges against Bradley Sinclair on 2 counts. Count 1, filing a false police report, a misdemeanor under D.C. Code. He had told officers that Lorraine and Denise were aggressive, intoxicated, and refused to pay. Video evidence and 6 witness statements proved every claim was fabricated. Count 2, simple assault. The deliberate act of ordering a drink thrown onto a patron was classified as offensive physical contact under D.C. law. Tiffany Holt was charged separately with 1 count of simple assault for physically carrying out the act. The criminal trial lasted 3 days. The prosecution played the video. They called Nolan Graves, who testified to what he witnessed from his booth. They called the older couple who saw Tiffany pour the drink. They called Officer Dawson, who detailed the contradictions between Bradley's statements and the evidence. Bradley's defense attorney argued it was a misunderstanding and a service dispute that escalated. The jury did not buy it. Bradley Sinclair, guilty on both counts. Sentence, 180 days suspended, 200 hours of community service, 2 years of supervised probation, mandatory completion of racial bias education and anger management programs. Any violation of probation would activate the full jail sentence. Tiffany Holt, guilty of simple assault. Sentence, 90 days suspended, 150 hours of community service, 1 year probation. Then came the civil case. Lorraine Foster, one of D.C.'s most accomplished civil rights attorneys, filed a lawsuit against Bradley Sinclair, Tiffany Holt, and the restaurant group. The charges: racial discrimination, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and violation of the D.C. Human Rights Act. The case was assigned to Judge Harold Sutton, a veteran jurist known for firm rulings in discrimination cases. The trial was methodical. The evidence was overwhelming. The video, the witnesses, the internal investigation report, the 3 buried complaints, the pattern of behavior stretching back years. Judge Sutton delivered his ruling from the bench. His voice was measured, but left no room for ambiguity. The court found that the defendant's actions constituted deliberate, racially motivated humiliation of a paying customer in a public accommodation. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not a service dispute. This was a coordinated act of contempt directed at a woman because of the color of her skin. The restaurant group settled for $2.8 million. Bradley Sinclair was personally ordered to pay $95,000 in damages. Tiffany Holt was ordered to pay $40,000. Lorraine Foster sat in the courtroom when the verdict was read. She did not smile. She did not celebrate. She nodded once. The same steady, unshakable composure she had shown on the night a stranger poured Coca-Cola on her for the crime of laughing. She donated every cent of the settlement, the full $2.8 million, to establish the Foster Justice Initiative, a legal defense fund for victims of racial discrimination in restaurants, hotels, and public spaces across America. When reporters asked her why she gave it all away, she said 5 words: "It was never about money." So where are they now? Lorraine Foster went back to work the Monday after the verdict. She did not take a vacation. She did not do a press tour. She walked into Foster and Whitmore at 7:30 in the morning, poured herself a cup of coffee, and opened her next case file. Because for Lorraine, the fight was never about one restaurant or one man. It was about every restaurant, every man, every woman who would sit down at a table somewhere in America and be told she did not belong. 6 months later, she stood on a TEDx stage in front of 2,000 people. The talk was called "The Cost of Laughter." She spoke for 18 minutes about what it means when a Black woman's joy is treated as a provocation, when happiness becomes a threat, when laughing in public is enough to get a drink thrown in your face and the police called to your table. That talk has been viewed over 6 million times. It is shown in diversity training programs at more than 40 corporations nationwide. Desmond and Lorraine together launched the Foster Foundation. Its mission: accountability in the hospitality industry. In its first year, the foundation funded undercover audits of restaurants and hotels across 12 states. Those audits resulted in over 30 formal discrimination complaints, 9 lawsuits, and policy changes at 3 national hotel chains. The foundation also established a legal hotline, free of charge, for anyone who experienced racial discrimination in a public accommodation and did not know where to turn. Denise Moore wrote an op-ed for the Washington Post. She titled it, "The Other Woman at the Table." In it, she described what it felt like to sit beside her best friend and watch her be humiliated, to feel her own hands shaking, to want to run, and to hate herself for wanting to run. To watch Lorraine refuse to move, and to understand in that moment what courage actually looks like when it is sitting in a Coca-Cola-soaked dress. The piece was shared over 200,000 times. Nolan Graves won a regional Emmy for his coverage of the story. In his acceptance speech, he said one sentence that stuck. "I didn't break that story. A woman who refused to leave her chair broke that story. I just held up the phone." The Carlton Room reopened 3 months after the verdict under entirely new management. The new general manager, a Black woman named Claudia Stevens with 2 decades of experience, overhauled everything from hiring practices to staff training. The restaurant now hosts a free community dinner on the first Saturday of every month, open to residents from underserved neighborhoods across D.C. The wait list for those dinners is 4 months long. Bradley Sinclair could not find employment in the hospitality industry. No restaurant, hotel, or catering company in the D.C. metro area would touch him. Public records show he relocated to a small town in rural Virginia. He completed his community service hours at a food bank that serves predominantly Black and Latino families. Whether he learned anything from that experience is something only he knows. Tiffany Holt completed her community service and probation. She issued a brief public statement accepting full responsibility for her actions. She said she should have refused Bradley's order. She said she would carry the image of Lorraine's face, mid-laugh, then soaked in Coca-Cola, for the rest of her life. She now works at a nonprofit that advocates for workers' rights in the restaurant industry. And Lorraine? She still orders a Coca-Cola every time she celebrates. She still laughs the same way. Big, warm, from deep in her chest. She never let them take that from her. Now, I want to talk to you for a second. If this story made you feel something, anger, frustration, maybe even a little bit of hope, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment right now and tell me, what would you have done if you were sitting at that table? Would you have stayed like Lorraine, or would you have walked out? And if you have ever had your joy interrupted, if someone has ever made you feel like your happiness was too loud, too visible, too much for the space you were in, share your story in the comments. Your experience matters. You are not alone. Hit that like button if you believe every person deserves to laugh freely without punishment. Subscribe if you want more stories where justice is not just a word, it is a verdict. And share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. Because the real question was never whether this kind of thing happens. The real question is what you do when you see it.